I had no idea where it was all going to go. For me, it was kind of like, it was just this creative, fun, kind of exploratory thing that I mean, we all had kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a grudge, but you wanted to, you wanted to make a hole in the system or make a dent or a crack in the system. You wanted to say something about society as it existed, and the inequalities and the stupidities, that kind of stuff. And I guess because of, it was coming out of the whole 60s matrix, which had at that point become, the music had become kind of decadent in a number of ways. And the younger people had, they'd caught on to that and seen it. They'd kind of actually latched on, and then they'd see, by this time, there was cocaine and heroin and all this stuff going on. And I mean, if you heard the word hippie, you saw a lot of burned out people, and it wasn't really an example of what that energy was really about. Later on, it was kind of, reassessed to be not quite as, because there were people who had actually, myself included, who had been in that kind of movement and who had taken a different route, from the harder drugs, from the speed, from all that kind of stuff, and were experimenting with, how can I say it, meditation and diet and astrology and that kind of stuff as personal tools for self-empowerment, in a sense, right? But what I liked about when that whole punk thing was happening, there was a certain exuberance and spontaneity there. And it was pure at the beginning, it was good. And the style had changed. It was like, this great kind of thing where, there were zippers and safety pins and all that kind of stuff and rips, and we began to just exploit that. I, as a kind of someone who was interested in the visual sense, started becoming very interested in things like just the abstract aspect of zippers and safety pins as sculptural elements, and spit, and began to do sculpture based on those things, right? Spit sculpture and stuff. And so it was very fascinating to me. It was great. I needed a singer, and Ibra was my girlfriend at that point, and I asked her if she could sing, and she said, "Well, I don't." I said, "Can you scream, actually?" Because the story is, I'd went to one of these gigs, and the punk girls, between sets, there was a microphone, and they went up to it and they started screaming, and I thought, well, this is really, really interesting. When they did, the whole air was filled with this sound, and I thought, now to have that in a band, it was magnificent. It was great. I thought, too bad it couldn't go on longer, and it gave me the idea to have a woman fronting in my band doing really high-pitched screaming type of vocals. I had actually heard Diamanda Gallis and other sopranos doing abstract sounds. I was aware of Meredith Monk and Laurie Anderson, these kinds of people, but I wanted something more powerful. Anyway, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it, but screaming seemed to be the perfect type of vocal for me. It was kind of like a horror movie thing, the whole Alfred Hitchcock approach. At a certain point, I thought a screaming female would be the perfect metaphor or symbol for a fucked up social system. So I asked Ibra, then my girlfriend, if she could scream for an extended period of time. She tried and was incredible.
The singer was just, there was nothing but a constant amount of screaming, like somebody was being raped, murdered, like every possible ugly thing that could happen to that person. And that was considered singing and vocal at the time for that band. And they had the cops called on them because they thought somebody was being beaten or raped or something, right? And when the police showed up, it was just like, trying to explain to the cops that, no, this is just the way our band is or whatever, right?
Emotionally, I was exhausted after. But the actual screaming part, it wasn't cathartic for me. It wasn't like I had to scream because I felt like I had to release this angry energy or anything like that. Basically, it was just a vehicle for the music. And what really turned me on was the lyrics, because even though I was screaming, you couldn't understand them. They were very, very powerful. They were poetry, and that was something that Nathan created with these very powerful lyrics.
Well, sometimes it was hard because I'm a perfectionist in terms of like, and Ibra, I had no idea what it took to actually to sing like that. Now I know, because you know, if someone is to kind of go on for 20-25 minutes screaming, you know, most of the time she'd lose her voice for 2 or 3 days afterwards. But at the time, I'd like, you know, she would be doing something, and I said, no, it's got to be higher. It's got to be, you know, we've got to, using the, you know, limited musical language I had, I would push, and you know, there would be like, you know, arguments, and there was bad words, but I wasn't trying to be like a bad guy or a mean guy, but I just wanted the best. And the other people actually didn't have as much interest in the band as I did. It was just, oh, this is interesting, right? But for me, it was my kind of sculpture or my painting, and so I wanted to do the best, most powerful job I could. So when I thought sometimes it could be a little bit better, I pushed that. And I kind of got, I think at one point, you know, I got the reputation for being kind of like difficult to work with, even in some interviews, because like they were, you know, they would take stuff out or misquote or something or spell the name wrong. And I sort of thought, you know, like, what is this about? You know, how many times do I have to go through this? So I would be quite vocal about how things should be defined or how things should be done. And some people, you know, they wanted to control the whole thing. And so anyway, that's how I think that started. My only interest in being kind of particular and perfectionist was to do a good job. And even for that one recording, I felt if I'll take all the flack, that was worth it. I got her to sing that way. I got David to you know, to play, and basically we did, I think a very good job. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nathan, your songs are long.
Yeah. Why? Well, the first ones were actually like 1 minute, 2 minute. They were like very, very short. Yeah. That's because we actually had a drummer at one point. We actually had a couple different drummers, and it kind of was okay, but it wasn't. And then we had a saxophone player at one point, or somebody played the saxophone. Actually, after that, we consolidated into a 3-piece, and then the pieces got longer. And we were kind of like, if I look back on it, we were kind of like the Velvet Underground of the Vancouver scene, and began to do that kind of, you know, I began to open up all of the kind of valves in a sense, like, okay, there's no limits to how we're going to do this. We're going to break all the rules. We're going to detune, we're going to use weird tunings, we're going to, you know, I had a radio in the guitar and a microphone in the headstock, and a noise generator and a high frequency treble boost that gave me this dentist drill sound, right? So anyway, it was just kind of, okay, we can take this wherever, and let's do it. Let's kind of see where it goes, and just push it to the limits.
How did you do these recordings?
Because
you are talking to, I mean, we are Neanderthal,
yeah.
In comparison to a newer, even an older generation of viewers.
The best recordings we had actually were one was done on a ghetto blaster, believe it or not. The one that's on the record, and this was like, I can't remember, it was about this big, and we just used to try and document the gigs, right? So when we did the one called Beauty Secrets at the art school, we put this on one side of the stage, and amazingly enough, the recording is incredible, and it was good enough to be put on the record. Nothing else was, you know, really cleaned up on it. The other one, Jihad, was done on TIAC Porta Studio 4-track. I think part of it was done in our studio and part of it was done at home using like headphones. It was just, you know, using a tape. And we didn't really know how to use that stuff. We just kind of, you know, you put the thing in and you followed the instructions and, you know, you did it, right? So that was our great, you know, and then the other ones were done on some were done on the TIAC and some were done with this Ghetto Blaster thing. And I think that's the majority. That's how they were done. And like, we didn't have a lot of know-how or, you know, mic placement, all that kind of stuff. And so it actually probably comes out, but in the other sense that there's a rawness about it that also makes it, I think, kind of, gives it a certain vitality. So I decided to put some CDs out as souvenirs for the people that were there. And I guess I probably was going to put out 500, but I put out, I think, 75 or 80. And then I just ran out of labels. I actually phoned Joey Shithead about where to get the labeling done, right? Because I had actually wanted him to distribute the record, but he wasn't interested. And someone had said, well, you should contact him because, you know, he's doing this stuff. But I don't think he was really, I think he saw us once or in the early days or twice, and they weren't particularly good gigs, right? They were like, the one is on the internet, that Rock Against Prisons, which I tried to kind of get off, because it's embarrassing for me. But I think that's what he knew. I don't think he ever heard the recording. I think if someone listens to the recording, I think that they can give us a little more credence or a little more respect than some of those early gigs, right? And I have to say, like 50% of those early performances were really bad. And it was because something we did with the setup, we didn't know how to plug the thing in or whatever. Yeah.